Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Magazines and Journals panel. My name is Tali Voron. I'm the founder and publisher at the Soapbox Press and a member of the Meet the Presses Collective, and I'm so excited to be your host this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us at our first Indie Lit Symposium. From November 26th to 29th, we've been offering a series of panels on a variety of topics related to small press. Be sure to check out our Indie Market, where we feature 2 titles from each of the presses taking part in the symposium on the Meet the Presses website. If you'd like to purchase any of the titles, you'll be able to select them on our site, and Meet the Presses will sort out the order for you. And of course, we also really encourage you to check out the presses websites directly. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that although we're gathering in a virtual space, Meet the Presses conducts the bulk of their activities in Toronto, which rests on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We encourage you to learn the history of the land you are currently on as we reflect on the past and acknowledge the change made going forward in the process of truth and reconciliation. The first 30 minutes of today's a lively moderated discussion with our panelists, Mark Laliberte, Amy LeBlanc, Jeff Blackman, and Lauren Stewen, as we pushing boundaries in small press. When we reach the Q&A portion of the event, which will take place during the last 15 to 20 minutes, you're also welcome to use the Q&A box to ask your question. If you'd like to chat with other attendees, which we see you've already been doing, or with the panelists or myself, then be sure to use the chat box through the event. And if you're leaving a message that you'd like all attendees to see, then select to all panelists and attendees. And if it's just a message for the panelists, then you can send it to just the panelists. This event is closed captioned, and to enable captions, just press the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our panelists. Mark Laliberte is managing editor of Carousel magazine out of Toronto, which has published poetry, fiction, interviews, art, and comics since 1983 and just went entirely online this month. Amy LeBlanc, managing editor of Filling Station out of Calgary, has published innovative poetry, fiction, book reviews, creative nonfiction, photo essays featuring a visual artist in every issue since 1992. Jeff Blackman is the publisher of These Days, a photocopied Ottawa-based zine that emerged in the COVID era, publishing poetry, fiction, personal essays, and comics. Lauren Stewen is co-editor-in-chief of Augur, a triannual digital literary magazine publishing speculative, surrealist, fantasy, and strange fiction since 2017. And now, let's welcome our panelists. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm so excited to talk with you all. So let's dive right in. I would love to start with Lawrence, and if you could just tell me about your zine or your magazine and the kind of work that you publish.
Yeah, of course. So Augur Magazine, we publish short stories, flash fiction, poetry, and graphic fiction. And when it comes to the kind of genre or style of work that we publish, it's mostly within the categories of like dreamy realism, slipstream fabulism, magical realism, and of course like literary spec fic, for lack of a better word. But yeah, our favorite stories honestly just kind of defy categorization. So they're either the ones that are too speculative for the big CanLit magazines, or are not speculative enough for kind of the more genre-focused speculative magazines. So those are our favorite kinds of stories. But yeah, that's what we generally publish.
Oh, thanks so much. And Mark, what about at Carousel?
Sure. Carousel magazine is sort of very interested in poetry and fiction as a kind of starting point. But about more than a decade ago, we started to really think about our space as a kind of hybrid space. And we wanted to bring visual art and writing together, but not in a decorative kind of way, in kind of real dialogue with each other. And we found that comics and experimental comics was a sort of medium that bridged both those spaces. So we've treated visual art as kind of page works. We're interested in interviews. We're interested in, where visual poetry meets weird comics, meets meets fiction, et cetera, et cetera. So that idea of hybridity, we started using the term hybrid work like 12 or 15 years ago in the journal. I think the kind of like definition of what hybrid always surprises me, because it's not what we think about, but we think of that overlap mainly. I think about 8 years ago, we sort of added a tagline, hybrid literature for mutant readers. I don't know, just to kind of like push it a little further. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And what about Jeff with these days?
Yeah, so these days it's a mostly monthly zine that I launched in response to the pandemic. Like literally about a week or so into lockdown in the March, I wanted to do something to connect with people and sort of encourage writing and art and reflection, especially by those people who maybe don't make art or poetry very often or such. So it features anything that can be printed in a black or white zine with sort of a soft focus on responding to our collective predicament we're all in right now. So it's based on people that I've reached out to, poems, drawings, and photography, but also kind of interviews with arts organizers, short articles, games, and we did a whole issue profiling causes and charities as well. This sort of focus on ways people can like engage with the world around them and help in some way. So ultimately about half the content is responding to these days, as it were, and half is whatever people are working on that month. We sort of focus on it being kind of like timely.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And Amy, what about at Filling Station?
So at Filling Station, our kind of big mandate is just experimental work. And like you said in the introduction, we publish fiction and poetry and nonfiction and artwork. And a lot of the time it's kind of like what Lawrence was talking about with Augur and with Carousel, these hybrid pieces where they're not quite mainstream enough to be a good fit for a lot of the CanLit journals. That's the kind of work that we absolutely love. So things that kind of slip between genres. We have some fiction in our upcoming issue that looks a lot like poetry. And we have a lot of like computer mediated poetry, just kind of various ways that people take things and totally flip them on their heads. And in most issues, we've got what we call a project lab as well. So it's the same kind of dialogue between art and the other sections where we have a deep dive into an artist. We don't have one in our upcoming issue, but most of the time we do. And we publish 3 times per year. We're doing 2 times this year because I'm sure, as everyone else has felt, COVID slows everything down. So we're just kind of pulling back a little bit this year so we can do 2 really solid issues and just make sure that we're publishing really, really great work and just putting the time into those issues that they need.
Great, thanks so much. And it's so great to hear amongst all of you, one kind of commonality is that each of your magazines is looking to publish work that seemingly doesn't fit anywhere else. And it's great that there's a space for that. So we asked all of you to feature 2 issues or titles on our website. So I'd love for you to speak to those 2 issues and why you chose them. So maybe let's go the opposite way this time. And Amy, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we decided to feature issues 73 and 74, which are the most recent published issues. 73 was just an open theme. So we just had regular rolling submissions coming in. And then 74 was an issue that I was really excited about. It was our themed issue. And we decided our theme was rituals. However, that was defined. So I have a copy of it here. We have this great cover art by Katie Green, who's a really cool Calgary artist. And we just ended up with a really neat compilation of submissions to choose from. Like, I love this issue so much. That's why I wanted to feature it. And it was just kind of a deep dive into personal rituals and what those look like. And this whole issue was assembled before COVID hit. And then we launched it online during COVID, and then we could have conversations about like COVID rituals and how our rituals have changed in our day-to-day lives. So I think maybe because this was an issue that like started before COVID and then was published in COVID, I have a weird relationship with it. But yeah, those are our 2 titles that we decided to feature. So definitely check them out. There's some incredible work in both of them. I'm very proud of both of these issues. These were both published under Kyle Flemmer, who's the previous managing editor, and he just did an excellent job getting these issues together.
Awesome. And Jeff, what titles did you feature?
Yeah, so like Amy, I featured our most recent two issues. That'd be issues 5 and 6. So the first issue 5 was supposed to be August, wound up being September. Issue 6 was supposed to be October, wound up being November. I have very understanding readers. And I think the two issues kind of speak to the kind of half and half notion I was speaking beforehand. Issue 5 is not really topical. It's sort of like whatever came in midsummer from people I reached out to or attributed previously. But by chance, and this is another issue, I think if serendipity happened a lot of my issues, it went up with almost a whole issue about motherhood. I had poems by old friend Cassandra Spastic about pregnancy, Ellen Woodward about a poem for her mom's 60th birthday, a poem by Peter Gibbon of Toronto about his wife's late grandmother, and then I'll poems about poems by my mother, Gail Blackman, about just staying in touch, and that's the challenge of that happening. Literally right now in the background, you may hear my mother and my son having story time. So number 5 was like this by accident motherhood issue, which is really neat, and there's little copies available of that via my Etsy store. Issue 6, the most recent one, is a bit more topical and Ottawa-centric. There's a whole number of photos of Ottawa's downtown neighborhoods by my partner, Kate Maxfield. There's an article about houselessness and vulnerability by Vanessa Davies about finding a dead man in the park near her house. And there's also an interview with VerseFest administrator Avonlea Fotheringham about moving VerseFest online. Ottawa's International Poetry Festival. They're tentatively the whole damn thing online. So it's a nice mix of like a bit of a poetry issue, which wound up being thematic by chance, just by getting a lot of people involved, different walks of life, and then a more like, okay, we're going to do an Ottawa issue as well. So those are the recent two. We're working on the holiday issue. Stuff's coming right now. That'll be out later in mid-December.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I think I missed the memo on actually featuring 2 issues on your site, but I have issues here, and so I'm perfectly willing to talk about them. So of course I would point to the current issue, which is our final print. I guess I should clarify, final regular print issue. We've just sort of stepped back from the idea of worrying about a subscription base, having to meet the kind of regular deadlines that print sort of imposes. So certainly the current issue with our kind of blown up cover, which is an indication of this move to online, is an issue I'm quite proud of. And it's very in step with all of the previous issues of Carousel. But I'm also going to feature this book that sort of I published as the editor of Carousel. I did in sort of the content of what happens in the magazine. And one of the things I created maybe 5 or 6 years ago with Carousel was a kind of experimental comics section. And when that grew sort of bigger than what the magazine could sort of accommodate, I first created a website, and eventually I put out these anthologies. So this anthology came out like during the pandemic. It's just out as of this month, really. It was supposed to be at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and that didn't happen in March. And then, we finally got it here. But this, I think, is part of the spirit of how we'll be moving forward with print ideas with Carousel. We still are very in love with print, and we want to do sort of special things. So there will be books, but they might be focused on, whatever specific idea we think makes sense in a kind of more long form version of a book. So I'll point out those 2 things.
Thanks so much. And I'm sorry that you didn't hear about our feature titles in time. So everyone be sure to check the link that was just put in the bio to take a look.
Yeah. You can get Carousel issues at carouselmagazine.ca, and you can get 4-panel things at popnoir.ca. So if anyone's interested in the issue, we'll just aim you there.
Yes. And Lawrence, how about it?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to follow after Carousel Magazine and say that Augur also didn't meet the deadline on time for the issue submission to your website. But I will post a link in the chat that goes to the Augur store. And the 2 issues that if we did end up meeting the deadline that we would have liked to feature are issues 3.1 and 2.3. These are our two latest issues. Our issues are all digital, and they usually aren't themed. These ones aren't, but just by chance, we did end up featuring a lot of stories in 3.1 about post-colonialism, about motherhood, about uh, like fantastical kind of supernatural horror as well. So for some reason, like just by chance, like a lot of that kind of theme echoes throughout 3.1. 2.3, on the other hand, the stories tended to be a little gentler and a little softer, more focused on things like loss and remembrance and things like that. So yeah, those are basically the two issues that we would have liked to feature. But yeah, you can just visit our website at augurmag.com and you'll be able to find them there. They're all digital, and you can also choose to subscribe if you want, or go through our entire issue if that sounds interesting to you.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. And I see that you posted the link, but to all panel get sent out to everybody.
Oh, that is a good tip. Thank you.
Can see and check it out. All right. So now that we have more information and insight on what your magazines do, I want to know what inspires you to do the work that you do, and what is the driving force of your publication. So, Mark, maybe do you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, magazines are really sort of special spaces, and you're kind of in dialogue with a range of talents, a range of voices. With Carousel, when I came on as editor more than a decade ago, immediately I wanted to kind of erase the emerging senior artist sort of divide, because I thought those voices really kind of worked well in dialogue together. We also really didn't really focus on geography all that much. Certainly it's weird because this year we've been in such a virtual space, and today we're on a panel, but we're all in different cities and we're attending these readings oftentimes where attendees and readers are from everywhere right now. And I mean, it's forced, but it's still kind of a great thing. It's forced because of the pandemic. And it really aligns with, I guess, how we've tried to treat that space. So it's really about community, but it's kind of about the blur between communities and how it's all really just one community. And that's what we try to do with the magazine, be really blurry.
I love that. Thank you. Amy, what inspires you?
I think for me, kind of building off of some of what Mark was saying, is there's just something really exciting about putting an issue together and taking these disparate voices and disparate pieces and putting them in conversation with each other. And I really find that especially with the themed issues, where there's this common thread that runs through all of them. It's just that everyone's taken it in a completely different direction. So for me personally, it's quite exciting to be in magazine work. And like Mark said, it's a blurry space. And it's a space where you can kind of have this wild idea and run with it. And I'm just always excited to see like new magazines popping up, because ours has been around for a while. And it's just always exciting to see new magazines and conversations with older ones, kind of like that emerging artist, established artist divide breaking down a little bit, that there's just kind of, especially in Alberta, which is where we're based, there's just this wealth of incredible work to publish, and people just have so many different venues to choose from. So I don't know, I just find it really exciting to be one of those venues and to kind of, I don't know, it's always just neat when you find people you haven't published before, or to be somebody's first publication or something. There's so many neat opportunities in magazine work. So I think it's all those little opportunities that add together that make me love this, and that keep me going with it.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Lawrence, what inspires you?
Well, inspiration and kind of a shared passion in the Augur team is really, really important, because we're an all volunteer team. And so literally without that kind of shared passion for what we do, we wouldn't be together at all. So so everyone on the team kind of has this idea of Augur being a shared space for marginalized creators to publish their works. It's kind of like our commitment to publishing intersectional narratives and representing like marginalized voices. It starts from the very founding of Augur, which was to kind of create this space where authors can go to if they can't get in their works out into the more, I guess, mainstream venues. So they can come to us instead. And it's something we try to do throughout the entire production process, all the way from the beginning of submissions to the end of editing and publication. We always want to try and keep our promise to represent marginalized creators and their works in a space that like reflects their values too.
Thank you so much. And Jeff, how about you?
I feel I'm going to be kind of repetitive here. I definitely feel like this idea of like blurring divides, as others have brought up, is sort of a big thing we've done, as well as trying to take the content I receive and make it sort of talk to another and go together in some way. That's sort of the big idea here is to kind of connect people. It's an odd thing, because it began with me, my neighbors, many of them are artists, and family and old friends, and adding people each issue. So in a way, it's a closed community in that it's just like people I kind of know, but it's grown to see people saying, hey, we took to this person and have a snowball sampling technique. Getting this person should be involved. And then perhaps the most exciting is kids getting involved in such, like Snea Madhavan Rees, the award-winning Ottawa poet. All three of her daughters have sent in poetry and art and such. So what sort of inspired me is to keep going is every month I get random stuff. People say, get that person, get this person. And I wind up with each issue is very unique in terms of content, because it's a mix of people I know and kind of know what to expect from them a bit. But then they're surprising me because I guess maybe because it's like a monthly thing happening in all this situation. People are sort of trying weird stuff. And then people might usually, I say, here's a copy of it because, you're my sister-in-law or an old friend of mine, they're writing and such. So it's very exciting to get all this stuff from people I don't expect and would expect to receive things from. And that just kind of keeps it going. What will come next?
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. It's so nice to hear all of your answers. So I know that between all of your magazines, kind of, Jeff, I believe it's just you, right, running these days?
Pretty much. My partner, Kate Maxfield, does help quite a bit, and with a lot of photography and such. And my neighbors have helped with providing supplies like paper cutters and stuff. So, but it is largely I'm in control.
Okay, very cool. So it's kind of going from you with the help of those around you to, I think, Filling Station and Carousel and Augur, you have a fairly large team. So I'd love to hear what the process is like of putting together an issue, all of your magazines. So maybe, Mark, do you want to start us off?
Sorry, did you just ask me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was moving a paper around. Yeah, well, Carousel, I guess I kind of act as the kind of wrangler of various voices, and we have a relationship with the University of Guelph, and we have a kind of student team that helps us with fiction and poetry, and kind of a lot of the rest of the magazine is a little bit more loose in terms of how things come together. For visual art, I was basically acting as the kind of curator in a way, to bring the work in, and people would propose interviews or articles about artwork or writing to the journal, and we would treat that in a the way this magazine or something like that might treat it, where you're working with a person and you're acting as their editor. It's always quite flexible. The team changes around me every few years, really. I guess, again, I kind of steer the ship. Since we've moved online, and part of the reason we've moved online is that we wanted to do things a little differently and respond to things faster. We started a review section. So we have a review editor who is kind of guiding that with me, and that's Jade Wallace, and that's a kind of new thing that we're having happen. It's been around for about 3 or 4 months, but we never really felt like review culture fit with us when we were in print, because by the time we had an issue in hand, you know, books that we would be speaking about were already sometimes a year old. We can be much more responsive online. We can do that across the board and work with people in a much more playful and loose way. And that's always how we've tried to run it. But with print, it's always been all fighting against the reality of what, you know, putting 2 issues a year together meant physically.
Yeah, for sure. Amy, what about the process at Filling Station?
Sure. So you are right. We do have quite a large team. And it's kind of like Carousel in that there is turnover within those volunteers. There's people that help out for an issue or two, and then people that help out for 5 or 10. So at any time, we've probably got about 20 or 25 volunteers. And most of those people operate as collective members. So we have 4 section editors for poetry, nonfiction, art, and fiction. And then each of those editors has a team of collective members that help make decisions on submissions and people that we might want to solicit. Fictional gets the most submissions. So we kind of bulked up our fiction collective this year because there's just so much to get through. So a lot of the decisions that get made about content are really collaborative. And that's something that I really like about Filling Station, is that no one person, for the most part, is making any decision. There's kind of this conversation that happens within the collectives about what a long list might look like. And then it gets whittled down to a short list. And then it comes to me, and then I can kind of make decisions in conversation with those section editors and with those collectives. And we're a little bit different from some other magazines, excuse me, in that the managing editor term is usually 2 years. So that there's just a good amount of turnover. There's enough time in that 2 years to plan for some succession. I'm at the very beginning of my 2 years, so I'm just learning how to do all this still. But what we end up with is just kind of a turnover of ideas that happens with that changing team and those changing volunteers. And that's always really exciting. So start to finish, it's really kind of a team effort. We have a designer that is outside of our regular team. She helps out with art submissions sometimes, so she's on the collective. But that's where it kind of becomes more of a one-on-one thing, and that it's the proofreading process and getting ready to print. But until that point, it's really a big team effort. And we just sent our 75th issue off to the printer on Friday. So our team got a big congratulations email, like, we did it. So it's nice to have that team experience, and that at the end of it, there's no one person that's saying like, wow, I put an issue together. It's always more like, we did it. And that's quite cool. And that's just one of the benefits of having a big team and of being a magazine that's established, because people kind of seek you out to volunteer. We don't usually have to find people to help us out. People are excited to join us. So that's always exciting. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown of our publication process.
Very cool. Thank you. I actually didn't know that about the turnover. So that's fantastic. Lawrence, how about at Augur?
Yeah, I have to say that I'm gonna have to echo after Amy. Having like a big team, Augur has a big team too. So it's like, I think right now it's over 40 volunteers that make up the entire team, and everyone's volunteer, all the way from the publisher all the way to the very newest first reader to the team. But yeah, so far in the past 3 years since Augur was founded, the turnover has been pretty stable. Like, I feel like most of the people who joined in the beginning are still around now. So I think we really value that kind of like loyalty, and also I think we feel like that basically the longer people stay in the Augur community, because we kind of view it as a community, the more they get to know the magazine better, the more they get to know the authors and the readers as well. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of how an issue is made at Augur. It's a pretty structured process, and it kind of has to be given the size of the team. So it all begins with the submissions process. We use an online tool called Moksha to kind of organize and also rank our submissions. This is also where the creators of the pieces can indicate their marginalization if they wish to disclose that. Members of our team and all of our first readers have to read like every single sub, and this is usually like a pretty tedious process because we usually get quite a bit, and it usually takes I think about a month or more for this for us to read all of them. The highest ranked submissions get forwarded to the editor-in-chief, and the editor-in-chief and the publisher work together to create a long list from these high-ranked subs. After that, the entire team, which is basically just the core staff, which is over 15 people, they read the long list and choose the pieces they think should be published. And once they've chosen that, we get together for a pitch meeting, which usually lasts for like 4 to 6 hours. It takes up most of the day. And by the end of the pitch meeting, we will have chosen the pieces we would like to publish. A few days after that, we send out the acceptance and rejection letters, and the authors get assigned to their respective editors. The pieces go through a thorough editing process that includes content edits, line edits, and copy edits. But we always want to make sure that throughout the editing process, we always make sure it's a collaborative process and that the author's vision always comes first. We really don't want editors that kind of demand that their vision superimposes that of the author. So after all the pieces have been edited, the magazine then gets put together and sent out to the authors and our team members for one final proofreading session. And then after that, it gets launched and the authors get paid. This process is really fresh in my mind right now because we're actually on the cusp of publishing issue 3.2. And yeah, you can look forward to that in December.
Thanks so much. Augur sounds like a well-oiled machine, as do Carousel and Filling Station with such large teams. Congratulations to all of you. And Jeff, I'm very excited to hear how you've been making these days.
So essentially, as I mentioned before, it started very small with me sort of just, it came out of conversation with my really good friend and sort of writing partner, Justin Million. It's me what could I do, in response to everything closing. And so it began with me reaching out to a couple of immediate friends like himself. And then I'm lucky enough to live next to like professional photographers and poets, like next doors down. So it began there, and also my wife and my son. And so each issue sort of built outward. These sort of reaching out to say maybe of course 20 households and 30 and 40, about 60 households now I've reached out to. And essentially, if I reach out to you, I'll send you copies for free for a while. And if you give me stuff, I'll give you copies for free for a while. And I'm now actually able to pay people $15 honorarium per issue. I have a Patreon and Etsy and such. I'm raising a bit of money, so it's not a complete loss. I have a good government job, so I can afford to pay some people, thankfully. But essentially, I get stuff every month. So it comes in a mix of me asking for things, people sending me stuff. And usually I'll do some sort of feature piece. So it might be an interview. So I can interview the organizers for the tree reading series in Ottawa, Riverbed reading series, and Verse Fest. After the George Floyd killing and the explosion of protests and such around the world, I did a real issue focused on charities and causes, where I emailed them saying, hey, special issue, I want to get any charity or cause that you support or benefited from and profile, made a catalog. So it's sort of like whatever happens over a month, maybe 3 weeks of me getting stuff, and then a week or two of me like printing everything off as it came in, like same font and everything, cutting it up and seeing what shape it should fit. So I've done 6 issues in 4 different sizes so far. Just sort of seeing how it works out. So we'll be sort of pasting it together in the basement and such. And getting it mailed out. This next issue, I'm going to do a big holiday one. So I did a big email to everyone, and I got like 13 people as of like an hour ago sending stuff already. And I usually include everything I get, like every person who submits pretty much is in. we're going to be very inclusive, and just whatever people send, I want to give people a chance to be involved in this sort of growing community and such. And then after that, I printed out, I used the photocopier. Some of the issues, my son and I have colored in stuff, added a bit of color to this black and white thing, and off it goes. So it's very much kind of like whatever happens that month or month and a half. So it's a bit of the schedule's a bit off occasionally, but the main is like whatever comes in, it's going to go back out as soon as possible. So to maintain that kind of timeliness, that's sort of the big impetus here. So that's sort of, I guess, the benefit of being a little small self-run thing is it's not going to have the reach of established magazines, but it has, I guess, the goal isn't so much to have a broad reach, as to have sort of like a very strong community building. So that's sort of the focus, and it informs the process and everything about it.
Wow, congratulations. And it sounds like you're doing exactly that, and that the momentum is definitely there. If you have the Patreon link handy, then please feel free to drop it in the chat. It'll be good to have it there for everyone to check it out. So my next question for you is, what is your vision for the future of your magazine? I know it's a big question, but maybe Mark, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, interestingly, as I said, we came out right around March with our final print issue. That issue, though, was sort of one of two that was in the works, where we were aiming towards that in the previous year. So we sort of positioned with this major change that really synced up with what was happening in the pandemic, but we had made all those choices pre-pandemic. And so it's a real pivotal year for us. We've been able to sort of think about that new space, a space we've kind of wanted to be in for a long time. But we had this history of print, and I personally am a graphic designer. I do design the journal. It's something that, I'm not super connected to the online as a person, but as an editor, I could sort of read the writing on the wall, and went through about a 4 or 5 year period where I saw all of our writers, constantly more aggressively asking us about posting their works and if they could post them. And, all the new magazines that pop up, no one really goes print. I mean, you're doing a zine, and that Jeff, and I'm not trying to be like declarative, but, like for a new magazine that's trying to go, in the lit scene proper, I mean, you wouldn't think of doing a print journal at this point. And so we were sort of stuck in this sort of middling energy where we kind of felt like we weren't doing our own work justice, and the task of promoting the writers' works that we're choosing justice, because we kind of always had to hold it back, show little excerpts, tease people, aim people constantly to please buy a subscription, please buy the issue. And, it started to feel like we kind of weren't maximizing our readership, which is in a way, in the end, it feels like it should all be about. So this major change has kind of been happening for us. And we're still not at that first that first issue that's also coming out in December for us. And I'm trying to adapt the idea of how to present it to people. We're actually, for this one, we're offering both a PDF. So we've effectively still done our physical issue design, but then an adaptation of the entire thing online. And in this period of 6 or 7 months where we've had the pandemic, because we no longer feel obligated to sell something, we held back issues, of course, and that's a whole other thing to deal with. But we've looked at roughly 2,000 pages of material over many issues, and we've started giving away the best content from the previous 20 or 30 issues for free, one a week, where we pick 5 of our favorite works. And we recontact the artists that we were previously in communication with, that we might have not talked with for 10 years, and sort of say, just to let you know, it's always been in our contract that we could put things online. We never did, but we're sort of visiting it, and we really loved your piece. And so we've actually published 100 works in our archive: interviews, poetry, fiction, artwork. that's all on our blog. Just kind of ramping people up to the idea that we're here and we're online, and this is going to be our new home where we're going to play. And if you never noticed us because you weren't paying attention to print, but you are interested online, like, we've done a ton of work and here it all is. And this is kind of our spirit now, like, where we're just going to kind of like not sell it to you, but give it to you. And at that point, I'm going to let someone else talk, but I'm going to put in a list of our links to all of our Facebook and Instagram, and because that's where we exist now. And so if you're watching this, feel free to like follow us or like us or do whatever you do, depending on the platform.
Thanks so much, Mark. And Lawrence, what about you?
Yeah, so the magazine part of Augur Magazine is actually only one initiative that has kind of that has branched out from the overall nonprofit organization, which is Augur Magazine Literary Society. As some people might know, another initiative that recently came out was AugurCon, which happened yesterday, which is kind of going to be an annual convention / conference that kind of celebrates the work that we do and the work of the authors in our community and in the broader specfic community in Canada as a whole. However, in the future, we do have more kind of goals and experimental ideas for what other initiatives can kind of branch out from this overall organization. And one of those goals is to be able to publish longer form works, such as novellas and chapbooks. So that'll be kind of like that'll be a small press kind of initiative. Another one that I believe is kind of hasn't started yet, but is on the verge of starting possibly in 2021 is Tails and Feathers, which is more of a, we kind of view it as a sister publication to Augur Magazine. It's going to focus more on slice of life, I guess you call it like soft fantasy works, and it's going to be published exclusively online in a kind of blog style format. And then I believe in maybe twice or once a year, the stories will be collected. It'll be all flash fiction, possibly poetry. It'll be collected and then published in a digital issue as well. And looking even further into the future, we'd also maybe want to branch out into things like a workshop program, where we can host like writing and poetry workshops as well, and possibly even a podcast.
Wow, lots on the horizon for Augur. That is so exciting. Jeff, how about you?
My plan for the future is to sort of keep going with this thing as often as possible until it seems unnecessary, i.e., I don't know, well vaccinated, I guess. So I don't know, depends which government official you ask how long that will be. So maybe it'll just to keep going. I might try to do shorter issues, so in order to keep it as timely and monthly as possible, rather than sort of get these big ones that get a bit difficult to keep going. I've had some other ideas. I've asked a couple people if they're interested in guest editing. Sort of they're in charge of the layout and all that for an issue. So no one's bit at that yet, but I'm going to keep pushing on that with new people just to get some different designs and such, and different people's vision of what the zine could look like. Maybe a little stuff online, sort of with my sort of broader Horsebrook imprint press. Like, it'd be fun to do sort of like like a live stream or something with some of the poets or artists who've been in the issues, and sort of like have like little talks kind of like this, or kind of like a virtual poetry show, just to kind of like add a little kind of something in between issues, sort of keep people engaged. And if you saw someone you liked in one of the issues, here's them again, you can talk to them or find out what they're up to. So I like to do that, find ways to sort of promote the people in the issues, so that it's not just you see them once, but you can find what they're up to again, hear from them, and potentially involve them and give them a little bit of control and stuff. It's not just my layout, my grand vision. So that's sort of some ideas I have for 2021.
Awesome. And Amy.
So for Filling Station, in the near future, something really exciting that we have coming up is we decided that issue 76 is going to be exclusively for BIPOC submitters. And I'm really excited. Jeff, you were talking about a guest editor, and this is my first time working with a guest editor, but Kinesia Lubrin is going to be guest editing this issue, which I'm excited about. I was like fangirling as soon as she said yes. And that's going to be really exciting. So if anybody that's attending today wants to submit to that, that's going to be, submissions are going to close on January 15th. I will put a link in the chat box with some more information if you want to check that out. So that's like the immediate future. I'm really excited about that issue. Something that I think a lot of magazines are starting to kind of grapple with is like, what does this new normal kind of look like in the magazine world? So we've been having conversations as we're trying to get a launch event planned, excuse me, for issue 75. And we've kind of had conversations about like, well, how do you host an online launch when everyone has Zoom fatigue and like the doom scroll and everything? But then there's also conversations about like these events have gotten, for the most part, a lot more accessible than they ever used to be. In that like you can have people from different parts of the world, you can have closed captioning, you don't have to leave your house. Like if there's disabilities in the question, like there's so many more ways to go to events now than there used to be. So there's even this question of like, when things go back to normal, do we just scoot right back into what we were doing before, or do we kind of keep some of this online programming because we'll know how to do it by then? So I think more than plans, for me, there's just a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to, that I'm trying to kind of figure out. It's like, what does this look like in the next couple of years? What do we want to keep from this really strange, stressful time? What do we never want to do again? There's a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to. So we'll get that figured out. But I'm really excited about our issue with Kinesia Lubrin. I admire her work so much, and I'm so excited to work with her on that next issue.
Thanks so much for sharing, Amy, and thank you to all of you. So incredible to learn more about what all of you do, and it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things coming up, and you're all doing such amazing work. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we have lots of questions coming into the Q&A. So I figure I'm just going to read out the questions, and whoever wants to jump on and answer, you are more than welcome to do so. So this was touched on a little bit, but do any of you have any programming, events, activities outside of the magazines you produce?
Well, as mentioned, that there was AugarCon yesterday, but if you want to go to it again, you'll have to wait till next year, most likely.
Okay. Oh, Mark, were you going to answer?
Oh, no, that's fine. I've talked enough. We're good.
Okay, what kind of submissions do you wish you saw more of?
I would really love to get more personal essays and reflections on just life these days. I've tried really hard to ask people, like people who aren't writers or artists, to write about the experience, whether it's working in retail or whatever frontline situation they have, or just being a parent or that kind of thing. And it's been tough to get people to respond. There's an intimidation factor because I've had people say to me literally like, I saw this amazing writing. It's also beautiful. I don't feel like I can add anything. So I'm just trying to be gentle and encourage people. I've gotten a bit of that, some good stuff, but I really just enjoy, like, that's sort of what I really sort of wanted when I founded this thing. And I've had great art and photography and poetry by people who are reflecting on the new normal and such. Like there's an amazing poem that Sam Van Rees and her husband Johnny, one of her daughters, wrote together about the new normal and all that it's constantly going for walks and stuff like that. So I've got some of that, but I really just love to get more like kind of like just little short personal essays, whether it's your own life, how things have changed, or if you're, because my audience is largely, inflected by artists and producers and such in the creative world, how has your process changed? And I think that's really what I'm really interested in, just seeing and sharing, to create a sort of a sense of solidarity among people. Like, okay, we're all in this crap together.
Yeah.
For us, we're trying to, if we want something, we try to create some way of bringing it into existence. So we decided to start a review section, but we thought we kind of like the idea of experimental reviews, and we don't see that experimental reviews exist, right? let's make it exist. And so when we started our what's called our user review section, there's two streams. There's traditional reviews, but there's this call for experimental reviews, with which we didn't define overly. But we sort of knew that we were, by putting out a kind of call to be playful, that two things would happen. We would actually get great new things, but also we would reject things. And writers don't sit on things when they reject them, they send them elsewhere. So like, we actually felt like we were creating, regardless of whether we had the room to take it all in, we were sort of creating new space within the community. And already we've seen it happen. There's been 2 other magazines that have adapted to this, what is I thought was a very good idea, to allow people to interact with review culture in a kind of a poetic, playful way, rather than necessarily a kind of academic way. And we appreciate both, but sometimes you just got to make it, right? So that's when we want to see something, we try to figure out how to get it.
Awesome.
For Filling Station, I would love to see more experimental reviews. We have published experimental reviews in the past, but we don't get too many of them submitted. They're usually solicited. So Mark, I hope that some of the people that you're not able to publish maybe
will trickle towards you.
Yeah, you can just kind of guide them our direction.
Yeah.
Because book review culture is so strange, and that there's, like you said, the academic format of just kind of unpacking like what the book is, what it does, what works, what doesn't. But there's something so neat about engaging with the book in the form that it takes, like a poetry review, in the form of poetry or something. Like there's so many cool ways to do that I think, I know for me as a book reviewer personally, I haven't tapped into that. So I do hope that we get some of the folks that you're not able to publish. That would be excellent.
Amazing.
And for Augur, well, I can't speak for the whole magazine. I can only speak for myself about what kind of works I would like to see submitted to us and published. I can say that personally, I feel like there's kind of been a lack of more hopeful pieces, which is understandable, just because of the kind of times we're living in. With the pandemic, global warming, political climate, and all those things. A lot of people tend to write like dystopias or pieces that tend to have darker themes, which is perfectly fine. But I would really like to see more pieces that have a more hopeful theme to them, or at least kind of a hopeful or a happier ending, just because I feel like those pieces are really important for trying to create the future that we would like to see and would that we kind of need right now.
I saw an interview with 3 or 4 significant kind of speculative writers who tended towards dystopia on CBC, and they were all saying that exact same thing, right? Like it's kind of like our next thing's not going to be like dystopian downbeat. It's got to be something different, maybe upbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks so much. Okay, we have 3 questions left in 4 minutes, so let's see if we can do this, everyone. Are you ready for a challenge? Okay, for a new online journal, any thoughts from panelists on how to build an editorial team or board?
My unique perspective, as I note about this, would be don't don't take a long time. Just get it, whether it's yourself or a small group of people you sort of already have sort of engaged with, people you trust and like friends, just start. I think there's a hesitancy when anything you have a new project, you want to be perfect. I've done this before in past lives. I think issue 1 should be a foundation for issue 2 and issue 3, issue 4. Don't worry so much about like getting everything perfect off the bat. Just get a first one out and then just ask for feedback, see how you can improve, and just keep going from there.
Great. Any other advice before we move on to the next question? Okay, no problem. Thank you. Jeff mentioned paying contributors. Which of the other magazines represented today pay their contributors and staff? What's the reasoning for your approach?
Cool. Yeah, Jeff, first of all, I just wanted to say, totally the right attitude, right? I mean, we see so many new magazines kind of coming online, and, you get that kind of like, oh, well, we're not able to pay at this time. There's kind of like a standard line and everyone drops in, or there's not even really any mention that they're not paying. Carousel does pay. I think it's a totally important thing for, I mean, like part of this relationship, I think, is that, you know, we're getting something and we're giving something. And, you know, writers, I mean, they simply can't continue to do what they do if there's not some sort of pay system. And it has to be sort of proportional to your scale. You know, probably, as I said, we do have a relationship with the University of Guelph. So we have sort of core funding to do that. And you can find Carousel's 2020 2021 rates on our submittable site. We put it publicly as we allow when people submit, they can see. But I mean, even if you just offer $5, you know, it's sort of like, it gives a sense that as a magazine, you have a understanding that, you know, without the work, there really would be no journal. And I understand when magazines can't, you know, there are magazines as a creator that I submit to because I love what they're doing. Even though there's no rate involved. But I mean, you know, you always want that to be kind of like the level up. So to start with that, Jeff, is great. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I might just add in there as well, the for Filling Station, we do something similar to what Carousel does, where our rates are unsubmittable. So it's very obvious when you're submitting that you will be compensated. So we have a standard rate. And then pieces that are accepted also get a 3-issue subscription. And that's kind of an important part of what we do, is that it's like, you're not just in this issue, you're part of this kind of filling station world now, where you're involved in all these other issues, because your content doesn't just happen once, it's kind of just, it carries forward into the other issues as well. So that kind of helps extend the readership a little bit, in that if they already have a subscription, they can just give it to somebody else. But we do make those rates for payment quite clear, because I also agree that that's really important. If you're able to pay your contributors for their labor, you should.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd really like to echo that. At Augur, we really value paying our contributors. In fact, we value it so much that our team is completely volunteer, and that's kind of, you know, that's kind of the sacrifice we have to make in order to pay our contributors, is that our team doesn't get paid, even though they do completely deserve payment. And we would like to give them, you know, some kind of honorarium or some kind of payment in the future. We're working towards that. But yeah, at the moment, we really value paying our contributors to the point that we are actually the highest paying speculative fiction submissions-based magazine in Canada. So yeah, if anyone wants to contribute to Augur and is interested in our rates, you can always check it out on the website. We're very transparent about that. But yeah, I would say that paying contributors is number one for us. And then after that, we think about paying the team.
Thank you all for that. I'm really glad that this question was asked and that you all prioritize your contributors and being able to pay them. So we're already running late, but I do want to get to this last question. So the question is, what's your favorite part of your job or role in the magazine? And I would like each of you to pick one word that encapsulates your favorite aspect of the job. So I'm going to give you a second to think, and then I'm just going to call on you. So Lawrence?
Editing.
Mark?
2 words, final product. Like, you know, yeah, when it all comes together.
Amy? Oh no, your mic is off.
There we go. Sorry, I did that so well. Final product as well.
Awesome. And Jeff?
Friendship.
Oh, beautiful. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel. What an incredible afternoon. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here with us, sharing all of your thoughts and insights and expertise, and being such a lovely group of people to work with and spend the afternoon with. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you haven't done so yet, check out the Indie Market on our website. Check out all of these magazines on their websites and support them however you can. Submit, check out their submissions guides, and get involved as you can. Lastly, we have one final panel coming up this afternoon at 2 p.m., the Small Press and the Craft of Bookmaking panel. So if you're able to join us, then please do. Thank you all so much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
So
everyone.
much.